Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today you find yourself trapped in an elevator, and amongst you are thieves who have stolen precious diamonds. At the same time, the thieves have opened some tins of toxic baked beans, eating them before they left. These baked beans caused the eater to emit horrible farts, triggered by darkness. You'll secretly be either on the innocent bystanders team or the farting thieves team. Now the farting thieves are trying to escape, and they'll win if at least one of them make it to the ground floor alive and conscious. The innocent bystanders are trying to make it to the ground floor without being rendered unconscious by the noxious farts. To do this, they must bind and gag all the thieves. Who Farted is the ultimate social deduction game of Who Done It for 5 to 20 players, takes 4 minutes per player to play, ages 8 and up, and published by Nerd Games. Today we'll be doing a rule school where I'll teach you how to set up and play the game so that you don't have to read the rulebook yourself. Now I've placed timestamps below me in the description of this video just in case you want to jump to a specific section of the rules. Without further ado, let's get started. Who Farted is the ultimate social deduction game of Who Done It for 5 to 20 players. You find yourself trapped in an elevator, and amongst you are thieves who have stolen precious diamonds. At the same time, the thieves have opened some tins of toxic baked beans, eating them before they left. These baked beans cause the eater to emit horrible farts triggered by darkness. You'll secretly be either on the innocent bystanders team or you'll be on the farting thieves team. The farting thieves are trying to escape, and they'll win if at least one of them make it to the ground floor alive and conscious. The innocent bystanders are trying to make it to the ground floor without being rendered unconscious by the noxious farts. To do this, they must bind and gag all the thieves. Each round, the lights go out, and since each person playing is given a secret role, some will use special powers as others' eyes are closed. Once the lights go back on, players get to talk and use deductive reasoning to work out who farted. You're trying to figure out who you can trust and who you can't. But those without special powers have only their wits and guile to rely on. After 2 minutes of talking, accusing others, and lots of laughter, players get to vote who will be bound and gagged that round. Over the course of multiple rounds, the innocent bystander team is trying to bind and gag all the thieves one at a time to win the game. To set up, you're going to select a narrator. This person is the one that has the most experience with Who Farted, but if nobody's played, give this role to the person who is most experienced with social deduction games. The narrator will get the game setup card and the narrator script. From the game setup card, they're going to locate the specific roles based upon the number of players. For example, in a 4-player game, they're going to get 4 cards: 1 farting thief, 1 mind reader, 1 innocent bystander, and 1 grandparent. Regardless of the number of players, once the roles have been selected, you're going to place them face down, shuffle them, and then deal one out secretly face down to every player except the narrator. They never get a roll. The object of the game depends on your secret role, because that will place you on one of 2 teams. If you're on the farting thieves team, you're trying to escape. At least one of you needs to escape and make it to the ground floor alive and conscious to win. All the players on the innocent bystander team are trying to make it to the ground floor without being rendered unconscious by the noxious farts. To do this, they must successfully bind and gag all the thieves. At this point, you might not know which team you're on because it's your first time playing. I'm going to go over all the roles and their rules in just a little bit, and you'll know which team you're on then. The game is played over multiple rounds. At the start of the game and in subsequent rounds, the narrator gets everyone to close their eyes in the lights go out phase. Now at this time, the narrator is going to read through their script. Now depending on the amount of players, they'll read certain parts. If you hear your role called out, the narrator will tell you that you can do your special powers. We'll go over these later. After that, you go to the lights go back on phase, where players will open their eyes from the narrator telling them to do so, and the players get to talk, introduce themselves through deductive reasoning, try to work out who farted. Now after a given time, approximately 2 minutes, all conscious players must vote on who gets bound and gagged. Now this is done by someone nominating a guilty party and pointing to this player and saying so, and then another person has to second this by another conscious player. The nominated player then gets 30 seconds to proclaim their innocence. After this, all players, including the nominated player, get to vote if the nominated player will be bound and gagged. This is done simultaneously. Thumbs up is yes, bound and gagged. Thumbs down is no. If there's a majority of players that vote yes, then that player is bound and gagged. If it's a tie or the majority is no, then they are not bound and gagged. Now after that vote, it starts a new round with the lights go out phase again. Now players that are bound and gagged are unable to speak. And remember, the victory condition for the innocent bystanders team is to have all the farting thieves bound and gagged. And the farting thieves win if they have an equal or greater number than the conscious innocent bystanders. Now we'll talk about how players become unconscious a little bit later. Now in the first round, when the lights go out, the narrator will actually introduce the different characters because some of them will do certain things at this point in the game. And keep in mind that everybody's role is face down on the table in secret and you never show it to anybody, but I'm going to have these roles face up as I talk about them. Now at first, the narrator is going to have everybody close their eyes. They're going to ask all the farting thieves to open their eyes just so they can see each other and see who they're working with secretly. Then they're going to have them close their eyes so everyone's eyes are closed. Next, the narrator is going to have the mind reader open their eyes. Now, they have the ability to read someone's mind and find out if they're a farting thief or not. Now, keep in mind they can only do this if they are conscious. What they'll do is they'll point to another player, and the narrator will either say thumbs up if the player is a farting thief, or thumbs down if they're not. Keeping in mind the mind reader's eyes are the only ones open at this point, then the narrator will have the mind reader close their eyes. If there are 5 or more players, the narrator will call the diver to open their eyes. Now, the diver starts with the peg. So the narrator will quietly give the diver the peg. Now the peg protects one person from the toxic farts. However, if someone gives the diver the peg, they'll go unconscious because it stops them from being able to hold their breath. So in the first round, they'll just be given the peg. In all subsequent rounds, at this point, the narrator will say, whoever has the peg, give it to someone else. And at that point, the person with the peg will point to another player and the narrator will take the peg from that player and give it to the one that needs it. And remember that the player that has this peg is immune to the toxic farts, unless of course it's given to the diver and then they go unconscious. If you're playing with 7 or more players, the narrator will have the grandparent and grandchildren open their eyes. Now you cannot nominate or vote to bind and gag each other, but it just allows you both to know that you're on the innocent bystander team together. These roles won't do anything in subsequent lights out phases. If there are 9 or more players, the narrator asks the suicidal pyromaniac to open their eyes, lets them know their objective is to receive the farting treatment, because if they do receive the fart, they immediately win the game. They then ask them to close their eyes. This allows the narrator to see what player that is, so if they do get the farting treatment, they know that the game is over and the suicidal pyromaniac has won the game. Now this role doesn't do anything in the lights out phases in future rounds. This is the only role that's sort of on its own and trying to win by itself. Now in the first round at this point, all players will then be asked to open their eyes, and they'll just have some time to get to know each other for about 2 minutes before they take some time trying to reach the ground floor. Now this is sort of just the introduction of the game. This is about 2 minutes, and then the darkness sequence will start. At this point, the narrator will have everyone close their eyes. They'll activate the mind reader. Then they'll activate the player that has the peg as mentioned earlier. And if the diver received the peg, then they will be unconscious, which also means the peg is no longer available. Then if there's 9 or more players, they'll have the gardener open their eyes. Now remember, at the end of the lights on phase, players will get nominated and then voted on, and if it's a majority yes, they'll be bound and gagged. So at this point, if there is at least one player that's been bound and gagged, the gardener will be asked to open their eyes, and they have a pair of secateurs which they can use to free a bound player. If they want to, it's optional, they don't have to. They select a bound and gagged player by pointing at them. Remember, everyone else's eyes are closed, and then the narrator will tap on that player's shoulders to let them know they are freed. And then the narrator will have the gardener close their eyes. Now, if there are 13 or more players, the narrator will have the contortionist open their eyes, and if they're currently bound and gagged and wish to remove the bindings, they nod their head, and if they nod their head, they are freed. The narrator will then have the contortionist close their eyes and have the farting thieves open their eyes. Now, they will then silently select one player to get the farting treatment and be rendered unconscious. The farting thieves will then be told to close their eyes. The narrator will have everyone open their eyes and they'll let everyone know who had got the farting treatment. Keep in mind, if it's the suicidal pyromaniac, the game ends and they win immediately by themselves. Now keep in mind, if the player that got the farting treatment had the peg, then they are safe and not told that they received it. Also, if the player is the diver, they are safe. Also, the narrator will make sure that if anyone's been freed, either by the gardener or the contortionist, that they don't say anything about that. Also remember, if the farting thieves now have an equal or greater number of conscious innocent bystanders, they win. And remember, at the end of the lights go back on phase, if all of the farting thieves are bound and gagged, then the innocent bystander team wins. That's pretty much it. You continue going through the lights go out and the lights go back on phases until one of those victory conditions are met. Well, I hope this helped you dive right into who farted and get to the fun quicker than you normally would if you had to read the rulebook yourself. Now, if you have further questions about the rules, go ahead and leave a comment below and I'll try to answer them best I can.